On the 11th day of NESmas, NESmaker gave to me some knowledge about triggering screens. That's right, today we're going to talk about screen triggers and what does screen triggers mean. Some of you guys might be new to game development in general. Some of you guys might be old heads who have used other game design software forever. Let's just talk real quick, real briefly about what a trigger means as we're going to be using it for this tutorial. So a trigger is simply an event that takes place in a game that makes screens behave in a different way once that has been achieved or unlocked or whatever. So a great example is simply you're playing an RPG and you get to the king's throne room and the king says, "Hey, go slay the dragon and I'll give you something cool." And then you go and you slay the dragon, and when you return to that throne room, he doesn't say that anymore. Now he says, "Wow, you slayed the dragon. Here's the cool thing," right? He says something different. Something different happens in the same location based on a trigger. Now, it doesn't always have to do with text. It could be that you trigger a screen, think Link to the Past, right? You hit a switch, and that's triggering a screen, and when you go through the levels now, the blocks are organized in different patterns, right? Or there was an area that wasn't passable, but you triggered, and now it is passable because now it's triggered, and when the screen loaded, it didn't load collision for that part. Well, we're not going to get that deep into triggers. I want you to understand the concepts of triggers, but what you can do with triggers is effectively, when a screen is triggered, you can have the loading information completely different on a screen, depending on the state that it's in, whether it's triggered or untriggered. And also there's a night and day mode in NESmaker by default. Really, that doesn't mean night and day or triggered or untriggered. It could just be 4 states that the screen can exist in if you're clever. You can do all kinds of things with it. So let's talk about a few things that we're going to need to understand. First of all is if we go into our screen and we go to screen info, this is where you set the screen trigger type. There's 255 screen trigger types. That's a lot of screen trigger types. You only have 512 screens, and you're not going to want to trigger every screen. The important thing to know is that when you trigger a screen type, so if you trigger screen type 0, that means every screen that uses screen type 0 is now going to be in triggered mode, which means it's not going to load this NPC dialogue. It's going to load the triggered NPC dialogue. It's not going to load this music. It's going to load this music. It's not going to load these monsters. It's going to load these monsters and these palettes, which is a great way to, like, when you trigger something, now the town is destroyed. The monsters are different. The palettes are different. Things say different things, and maybe you have morose music instead of happy music, right? So that's sort of another thing that trigger does is allows you to define different music, different palettes, different monsters for a screen. So it's really broad as far as what it can do. The other thing is this is a holdover, this project info. A lot of this is a holdover from previous versions of NESmaker. You can still access it, but it doesn't necessarily mean what it means, and a lot of these things are redundant compared to how we do it now. But one thing that is still relevant is your triggered screen types. If you just want to test, like let's say that you have a game where you have to go talk to the king, and then you have to go traverse to the other end of the world, get to the dragon, slay the dragon, come back, talk to the king, but you don't want to go through all that to check what happens if that screen does go into triggered mode. You can find whatever screen type it is and hit the button. Right now, screen type 0 would act as if it's triggered. Right now, screen type 1 would act as if it's triggered. Right now, 1 and 2 would act like they're triggered. So just let's think this out in a hypothetical way. If I trigger screen type 0 by default when I'm starting the game, this is where my monsters are here, and then NPCs here and here, if I'm in a normal state. If I'm in a triggered state, I actually put this guy over here differently, but really probably what you're going to see is this. You've got no monsters on the screen in triggered state. So in my normal state, I've got these guys, and in my triggered state, I've got nothing. So if I trigger the screen by making screen type 0 red, and why screen type 0? Because this screen uses screen type 0. I'm not going to see these monsters. Nothing's going to be on the screen. Let me show you. Start my game, and nothing's on the screen. No NPCs, because I set it into triggered mode, and triggered mode looks like this. So if I wanted to place a monster here, now if I'm in my triggered mode, which I'm in my triggered mode, still triggered. You're going to see there's going to be a monster down here, or Santa down here. There he is, and not up here. Whereas if I turn off the triggered mode, now we're back to normal. So again, this is just a way to test what happens if a screen is triggered, so you don't have to go through all the conditions you'd have to just to test the trigger mechanic. And now we're back to normal, right? All right, so let's actually make something happen with triggers. What we're going to do is we're going to deal with this guy here on screen number 2. Right now, the guy on screen number 2, he's set to use, let me check, screen NPC text dialogue group 1. So if I look at that, right now that's this one. I'm going to put second screen normal. And this is just the same stuff. I'm going to give him a new string here. So I'm just going to make this, I'm going to put like screen 2 normal. And I'm going to call this, I'm going to have him say, you did not talk to my friend yet, but you really should. He will get you on the nice list. Awesome. Okay. And then I'm going to make another one called screen 2 trig. I'm like, wow, you have been a good boy this year. Whatever, right? And then maybe I could have him give me an item or a weapon or something like that. So I'm going to make 2 different text groups. So second screen normal, screen 1 is going to use screen 2 normal. Second screen triggered, that first text is going to be screen 2 triggered. So if it's normal, it's going to show you did not talk to my friend yet. And if it's triggered, you say, wow, you've been a good boy this year. Awesome. So now, I'm going to come over here. Go to my screen 2, screen info, and make sure that he's going to be using second screen normal, not first screen. Hit OK. So now if I go talk to this guy, I'm going to expect him to say, you did not talk to my friend, you should, yada yada, whatever. So if I go here, I talk to him. You did not talk to my friend yet, but you really should. He will get you on the nice list. Okay. So now, what I need to do is I need to trigger this screen. I'm going to make this screen type number 1. So this is screen type 0. My first screen is screen type 0. They do not have to correlate to what level they are or anything like that. That's totally arbitrary. I'm going to start this. I'm sorry. That's not what I was going to do. I'm going to just trigger that to make sure that when it's triggered, it does show me the stuff that I want. So I'm going to go to my global info, triggered screen, and screen type 1 I'm going to set to triggered. And the other thing I'm going to have to do is, well, is that guy even there if I'm triggered? He's not. So if I'm in triggered mode, I'm going to have to put him there. So I'm going to go to screen info, day triggered monsters. I need to select monsters to put there. Now I can place him right there. So now if I go over there, this is what happens if it is triggered. And we're showing the wrong... Let's see. We're showing the wrong triggered info. So if I go to screen info and I go and I look, triggered day info is showing first screen stuff. No, I want to show second screen triggered. So now if it's normal, it's going to show second screen normal group. If it's triggered, it's going to show second screen triggered group. should show the second screen trigger group. Wow, you have been a good boy this year. Awesome. So it definitely is working. If I put it back, turn off the trigger, test my game, now he'll go back to saying the other thing, you should really talk to my friend. Didn't talk to my friend yet. Okay. Awesome. So that's working the way that we would expect it. We've got it set up. We've got the right things. The only thing we need to do now is how do we trigger the thing? Okay. So there's a lot of ways that we could trigger the thing. We could make a block that you step on to trigger something. That's one way to do it. We could set it up so you kill all the monsters and it triggers something. There's no one way to activate triggers. In fact, there's a really easy macro that you could put. If I look at my script, I can see I've got trigger screen with an argument 0. So this, if I just write trigger screen and a number in hex value, it's going to trigger that screen type. If I use the variable screen type, it will trigger the type of screen that I'm on. So if I'm on screen 7, it'll change all screen 7s, right? So if I have a tile type, I don't want to put an arbitrary number in there probably. I probably want to like change all the screens that are of the type of wherever that tile type shows up. So this would change all the types of the type of screen that you're currently on. So yeah, anywhere that you have in your code that you want to do something that triggers screen, you just write trigger screen and then either a number or the variable screen type, and it'll trigger either that screen or that variable type screen. So cool. But what we're going to make happen is when we talk to somebody, when we actually talk to somebody, it's going to trigger a screen. That's going to be the easy way that we're going to do for right now. Well, that's super easy. All I have to do is go to scripts, text, I'm sorry. And what do I want? First text to trigger screen type 1. That's what I'm going to have. It's not going to trigger its own screen type. It's going to trigger the screen type on the next screen over. So I'm going to just change my end of text action to NPC is trigger. And then this little extra window pops up that says screen type, and I'm going to say screen type 1. So now when I get to the end of this, and I hit the A button to close the text box, it's going to trigger all of the screen type 1s, and then they're going to trigger the screen. So the last time that we tested this, when I went and talked to the guy, he said, you should really go talk to my friend. So let me test this real quick. If I go here right now, you should really talk to my friend. Not talk to my friend yet. I'm going to reset the game by hitting Control T and messing. Now this time I'll talk to this guy first. This is text number 1. Seriously, good stuff, bro. Other stuff, more text. It will go off screen. Now that triggered the screen. I can come over here, talk to him, and now he's going to say, wow, you have been a good boy this year. You're on a nice list. Awesome. So that's a simple introduction into triggers. That's a really basic way of seeing we triggered something on another screen. Let's do the type where we step on a tile. We make a tile type. So this is going to involve like a line of code, but I just kind of want you guys to see it and get used to sort of how it might work to create your own custom tile. I think it's a good time to start looking at that again. First, let's go to my project settings, tile types, and let's name let's use tile type 7 and call it trigger tile. I'm going to hit close. So tile type 7 is trigger tile. If I go to my script settings, I can now go down to tile type 7. Right now, it's blank. So if I hit edit, it's just going to open up a blank script. Disregard these. I'm going to make a new file. I'm going to call this trigger screen. Notice I put these little symbols there, these little semicolons. That means that's going to be commented out. Ignore this because of Okay. Now, all I'm going to have this do is I'm going to say trigger screen type. And if I want an explanation of what this does is this will trigger all screens of the type of the screen I am currently on. Some of you guys might see an impending problem. That's okay. I'm going to Control S, and where am I going to save this? I'm going to save this to base 4.5 game. I made my little maze troll Xmas tiles. I'm going to call this trigger tile.asm and hit save. And now I'm going to set tile type 7 to that trigger tile that I just made. Go to my overworld, and I need to make a tile that's going to do that. So maybe this bridge right here. If I step on this bridge, I'm going to right click on the bridge, modify attribute, and change it to trigger tile. This will trigger tiles on the next screen. The problem is what it's going to trigger the screens of the type of the screen I'm currently on, which is 0. What type is this screen? 1. So with that script we just made, it's not triggering a defined number of a screen. It's looking at what screen type am I on? Okay, cool. Trigger all the screens with that screen type. So I have to change one or the other. Either I need to change this screen to 1 or I need to change that screen to 0. Since things are happening on this screen, I'll just change this to 1. So now when I hit that bridge, all of screen type 1s are going to be triggered. It doesn't matter if I talk to this guy or not. In fact, this is no longer going to work because that's going to trigger. Oh no, I'm sorry. Yeah, that does trigger screen type 1. I'm sorry. Yes, it would still work. But let's go and not step on the bridge. Let's go around and I'll talk to this guy, and he's going to say, "You should talk to my friend." Okay, now I'm going to reset Control T. This time I'm going to step on the bridge first. So we didn't really see anything happen, but it did trigger. So maybe what we want to do to make sure that this is noticeable, that it does do something, maybe we'll play a sound effect. What sound effect should we play? Oh, I don't know. Let's pick one. Let's pick OK, or power, SFX POWR, rock. All right, so what I'll do is I'm going to go back to that script I just made. Script settings. Go down to tile 7, edit. And after I trigger the screen, I'm going to play sound. It's a macro that we have. And it wants to know SFX. Oh, I'm sorry, we need a hashtag or pound or whatever you want to call that symbol. SFX underscore, and we need to make sure that it's named exactly like this one is, POWR. I don't even know what this sounds like, honestly. So POWR, and I'm going to save that. Let's test that. We're going to have a slight problem with the sound playback. Let's see if we can guess why. So what's happening? Every step of the game that my character is standing on this bridge is trying to play that sound effect. We can hear what it's going to sound like when I step off of it. What I need to do is I need to play the sound, and then I need to change this tile, right? This tile at collision, I need to change it into just a walkable tile. What I want to do is I just want to change the collision. I don't necessarily want to change the graphic, or maybe I do. I mean, maybe that's the easiest thing to do. I could just change the graphic along with the collision. So, I mean, the easiest thing I could do to make sure that it's actually making an effect is I could change tile at collision. Now, that's a macro that I have. So let's take a look at what it needs. If I go to scripts, oops, go to define scripts, I can see I've got one called change tile at collision. right here. And it needs 2 arguments. If I look at that, it needs to know, okay, what meta tile do I need to change to? And what collision do I need to change to? One thing that's really cool, if I can't remember this, I already did this in another step. I have a tile where I already do this with. Remember my prize block I do this with. That's how I make the prize block, prize tile disappear. So if I look at my troll pickup, I can see I've got this change tile at collision. It changes it to the 0th meta tile, which is the first top left one, which is usually ground, and it changes it to 0, 0. Now, one thing I might suggest is I'm going to need this stuff too, right? So basically, I need to do the same thing here. I need to compare it to the player. If it is player, do the stuff. If it's not player, jump to not player. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm just going to change this stuff right here. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to paste this in. And what I want to do is I don't want to update the HUD element, and I don't want to add value to the score. I don't want to do that stuff. I do want to change the collision. What I want to do is, instead of playing the coin, I want to play the sound for power. So I'm just going to put this here. And instead of adding the score like this was doing, I want to trigger the screen type. So I'm just going to cut that out, and I'm going to paste it down here. One thing you might want to do is these macros might corrupt some of the values that change tile collision might need. So what I would do is I would change the collision first, and then I would play the sound and trigger the screen type. So let's check that out real quick. It's something you wouldn't know until you start playing with it, but let's try that out now. And now what should happen is I should touch the bridge. It should change to ground. It should play the sound, and it should trigger the screen. It did. And the only way I can know if it triggered the screen is if I come over here, talk to this guy. Wow, and it did trigger the screen. Awesome. Let's just say that we didn't want, just another trick. Let's just say we didn't want it to change to, let's pull that up. We didn't want it to change to just the ground tile. So what I can do instead is, let me look at what tiles are loaded. And now it's just a matter of counting. So this is 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 4. There are, basically this is a row from 0, 0 to 0F. The next row here is 1, 0 to 1F. This would be 2, 0 to 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 4, 2, 5, 2, 6. So that's what I'm going to do. I want it to start on 2, 6. Save that. Oops. And let's test that. That represents the top left corner of the meta tile that you want it to change to. And now it's changed, and that's what triggered it. Awesome. You have been a good boy this year. So there are so many applications for this, and changing the text dialog with the trigger is not the only thing that you could do. There's so many things that you could do with triggers. You could write routines that load different tiles based on a triggered state. So, you know, this is only a house if the screen is triggered or whatever. And don't forget, this is really even better for games where you have to go back to the same areas over and over again and things like that. But I just wanted to give you an idea of how triggers worked, how you can easily write a couple of lines of code that could trigger a screen and that kind of thing. It's not like an undaunting amount of script, because most of that script is contained in the macro itself. Don't forget this. Don't be daunted by this stuff. All this is saying is, hey, when I run into that, is the index that we're looking at right now, the player index, is the object the thing that's doing the thing. If it's equal to the player object, that means, yep, jump to the is player label, which is this right here. Otherwise, it's not. Jump to not player, which is jumps it down here. So all this stuff does right here, this combined with this, all that does is it just checks, because we don't want monsters running around and a monster to trigger that screen, right? The only thing that should be able to trigger that screen is a player object, or like your projectile. You don't want to like shoot a projectile across the screen and the projectile triggers it, or maybe you do. So in that case, it would have to check if it's the player or if it's of a projectile type. That's a whole nother ball of wax, but you get the idea. You want to sort of have the conditions of when that tile type does a thing, And that's what you're saying, okay, if it's a player, do the thing. If not, skip right past this. So I hope that was a helpful look at what triggers are and how to use them, and gives you some ideas of things that you can do. Super stoked to see what you guys are coming up with. I think we're gonna get all 12 in before the holidays, even though we also got in the bite off video before the holidays. So it's been a crazy month with my daughter being born, my son's birthday, and the Christmas holidays, and the 12 days of Christmas, and the bite off competition. It's been crazy, and I appreciate you guys hanging with me. We got one more video after this one, and then we'll wrap up the 12 days of NESmas. It's been super fun doing these, so I hope you guys are getting a lot out of them. And definitely from here, jump into the module tutorials and have some fun with those. Thanks. See you tomorrow.